This video is not going to teach you how to build giant mountains from scratch. It's not going to teach you how to build forests of endless custom trees. It's definitely not going to teach you how to build something that honestly could be mistaken for a real life photograph. What it is going to teach you is how to transform the Minecraft landscape without having to spend a countless number of hours doing so. Now, I love terraforming and landscaping in Minecraft, but not if it's on a big scale. It can turn a once therapeutic task into a grueling chore. At least in my opinion it can. So whenever I do make some sort of custom terrain, it's usually quite simple and not super time consuming. The main reason for that is because I don't start with a blank canvas. Instead, I accentuate the terrain that's already there. What I mean by that is I take an already generated Minecraft landscape and alter it and add to it. The way that I thought would be best to do this is to find a piece of terrain, and I can walk you through the process and the steps that I take to terraform and landscape it into an improved version of itself. Of course, the first thing to do is to pick a location to transform, whether that means scouting your entire world for the perfect piece of terrain, or just sticking close by to your base and choosing an area around there. This is the area that I'm going to be using in the video today. I think it's already a pretty nice spot. Before you start placing or breaking any blocks, the first thing you can do is just take a step back from the area and have a think at what you actually want to do with it. Maybe this means taking a screenshot and possibly putting it into Paint and jotting out some ideas very simply, or just imagining what it's going to look like in your head. So for me personally, and the area that I have to work on here, I'm thinking first things first, I'd quite like to have a waterfall right at the top there, cascading all the way down, and possibly turning this into some sort of river running through. Maybe we could take it off round to the side here, or just have it continue down that hill and into the lake at the bottom. We've also got a couple of ledges almost on the cliff face here that we could maybe make a bit more prominent and perhaps turn them into overhangs. It's quite difficult to explain, but just trust me when I say I've got an image in my mind of how that could possibly look. And then it's really just smaller details, so we'll have maybe a couple of smaller ponds, some smaller waterfalls, some planted trees or very small simple custom ones, all that sort of smaller stuff that we can do towards the end of this build. But that's the general idea. Pretty simple in my case. Obviously, if you want to go simpler or more complex, that's up to you. But the idea here is you're just trying to imagine what it's going to look like when it's all done. So the next thing I like to do is just clean up the terrain a little bit, because sometimes it can generate in some really messy ways. It's nothing major, just filling in holes, completing parts that just look sort of unfinished, and changing up the terrain so it looks more natural. Sometimes it can generate and look really orderly and symmetrical, which is not what we're going for here. Basically, we're just prepping the area to be built upon with that image in mind of what it's going to look like. So here is the before and here is the after. Not a whole lot has changed, to be honest. It just looks tidier. And the next thing we're going to do is build all of the main elements of our area. So for me personally, I think that's just going to be three things. The cliffs on the side of our mountain, the waterfall starting at the top and cascading down into the river, which is the third thing that I'm going to build. Everything else that I want to do is on the smaller side of things. So think about what you want to do with your area and decide what is going to take the longest. Basically, I think that's the best way to look at it. Maybe you have some extra mountain peaks kind of coming off the side. Perhaps you want to build a bit of an extension somewhere. Just the large parts of the terrain, like I said, that are the most time consuming. All of the little bits we can get to later. Whilst I'm building all of this, I'm not at all worried about detailing it. There's no texture added in, I haven't got any smoothness with slabs and stairs, none of that, because we're going to be coming back to it after. I think the best thing to do, just to begin with here and get ourselves started, is to get the rough idea in place. That way the image starts coming together a little bit better, and you can kind of work through it slowly, rather than trying to do everything all at once. Oh buddy, this is really starting to come together. It's looking great. I hope you guys think so too. So of course we have our cliffs, we've got the waterfall and it connecting down to the river below. Now is a time where you can kind of have another look around and see if there's anything else that you want to add on to this that is a main feature. So maybe now is a good time to take another step back and have a look at what you've got and see if it feels like it's missing anything. For example, I maybe could do some stuff more towards the top of the mountain here. I'm just not exactly sure what. I actually think it looks pretty good the way it is, so I'm not going to. It's just most of the customizing I've done is down here at the bottom. I think that's why it feels a bit different at the top. But yeah, just take a step back, have a look at the build and see if there's any other main elements you want to add into this before we move on to the next step, which is actually kind of a 2-in-1 step. Part of it is adding in some slabs and stairs to try and smooth out the terrain a little bit so it's not quite as blocky. But the other part is to change up some of the blocks when needed. I've already done a little bit of that. So at the bottom here of this cliff, as you can see, as well as all the way at the top really, I've tried to blend the stone and the grass together a little bit just so there's not this really harsh line when the stone stops and the grass starts. So just go around and any parts of the build that you think maybe should be stone, add in that stone and kind of do a harsh line to begin with, and then afterwards you can go around and mix in some of the dirt. This will make a bit more sense once you can actually see me doing it on the time lapse, so maybe let's just go ahead and get started with it. One thing I quickly want to touch on is when you're doing all of this, it doesn't hurt to think about it realistically. So as you can see, I'm working on the waterfall and the river right now. Of course, if there's any sort of water around that is flowing, it's going to be washing away the dirt. So chances are, if any block is touching the water, in theory, it should be a nice smooth stone, not dirt, something that is very pebbly and would most likely just get washed away in the current of the water. Which is why all along the river here we have a bunch of stone, but of course we don't want that harsh line, so we can now go round and mix in that dirt and just make the change a bit more gradual. Of course, the next part of this step is to mix in the slabs and the stairs. I'm just going to be using stone blocks for now. We'll come back to adding in the texture afterwards, so just use whatever is the main block on show. Probably stone in most cases, but it could be something else. Basically, don't worry about texture just yet. Something I did quickly want to mention is don't go too overboard with the slabs and the stairs. It's perfectly fine to have some blockiness in the build. If you go too over the top and end up placing slabs and stairs on, every single block of stone that you have and make it really smooth, it's going to look weird in comparison to the dirt and the grass, because obviously there are no dirt, grass, slabs and stairs. So don't place in too many, just kind of smooth out the parts that you think are needed to. So spread the slabs and stairs out a little bit. Nothing major, but it's definitely an improvement, I would say. However, I don't think it's actually necessary. Adding in all of the slabs and the stairs definitely smooths it out, but it was fine with how it looked before, and I've got a good example to show you guys. Welcome to my single player world, or should I say a copy of my single player world, because I can fly. I'm in creative mode, it's a lot easier to show you around. So this is my watermill. It's a great build, one of my favorites, but that's not what I'm here to show you. Instead, I would like to show you the terrain around the build, as well as everywhere elsewhere in the world, but I think this is the best example of what I want to tell you. So as you can see with this terrain, it doesn't really look like I've done anything exactly. It almost looks natural in a Minecraft sense of the term, as though this could have actually generated this way. So I haven't got any slabs or stairs, I haven't added in any other stone blocks for some texture. I've just tried to make the terrain look nice, but also realistic in a Minecraft sense. And I've been doing that throughout my entire world here. Anytime I need to terraform, I've been keeping it very, very basic. So if you start feeling a little bit overwhelmed when I start talking about things like detailing with the texture and adding in all of the slab and stair variants, maybe you don't want to put quite as much time and effort into terraforming as that, totally fine. You could just do something like this. Stick to the naturally generated blocks and just try and pretty it up to make it look a little bit better. But I want to go a little bit more in depth for this video, so let's head back to the other world and we can get started with the next step, which is adding in the texture. So now we can go ahead and mix in some other blocks for the stone parts as well as the grass parts too. So for the stone parts, I'm probably going to add in some natural blocks like andesite, cobblestone, maybe a few patches of gravel. I'm not going to add anything in like stone bricks, for example. And for the grassy areas, very simply, we're just going to be mixing in some other dirt blocks like coarse dirt, rooted dirt, some regular dirt when possible. Obviously, you'll have to go careful with it growing from the grass, but we're just trying to make the transition between the stone and grass a little bit more gradual. And then on the bigger open spaces of grass, I will probably leave that as it is, but then maybe later we could come back and add some other stuff in and maybe put some more texture down if we feel like it. That's the next thing I want to talk about whilst we're doing all of this texturing in the background. Like you can with pretty much anything in this game, you can always come back to it later and change things, whether that's removing something or adding something else. Nothing is set in stone. Pun kind of intended. So at some point in this video, I will probably be altering things, whether I mention it or not. But don't feel like once you've built it, it's stuck there. You can always change things up after if you don't like the look of it. Add new things, get rid of something that you might not like. Feel free to go back and change things afterwards. Now, doing all of this texturizing can be a bit of a long process, so I think the most efficient way to go about doing it, and you may have been able to tell in the time lapse, but that was to go around and place one block at a time. What I mean by that is I would grab my cobblestone, slabs and stairs too, and go around to the whole area and mix it in. Then I would go around with my andesite, then my gravel, then my rooted dirt, then my coarse dirt, and just do any little touch-ups afterwards. But doing it that way, in my opinion, is so much quicker than just doing one segment with all of the blocks and then moving on to the next one. I just think it's a little bit easier to go and do it all at once several times over. But of course, you could try it another way and just see what suits you best. I did just quickly want to mention the way I've actually placed in some of these blocks. I haven't just mixed them in without any rhyme or reason. As you can kind of tell with the cobblestone, I've done it in strips almost, as though it's the terrain like cracking. So where I thought some like weak points could be potentially, I've sort of added in some lines of cobblestone kind of to show the wear and tear of the mountain and where some splits or cracks might be in the actual terrain. And then with the andesite, I added them in some quite spread out patches, and I did the similar thing with gravel, except as you can see, my gravel patches are quite tighter together. The andesite ones, they spread out just a little bit more. As for all of the grass and the dirt blocks, those have kind of been placed in without much rhyme or reason. I haven't done patches or lines or anything like that. I've just tried to make the bridge between grass and stone a bit nicer to look at. So the next step is to kind of do everything we've already done, but for the much smaller elements. So in my case, I think that's really just going to be a couple of small ponds maybe, possibly a couple of smaller waterfalls kind of connecting onto this river here to make a bit more sense, because that is a lot of water flowing just from one tiny source at the top, which, by the way, quick note on this one, I've actually made a tiny little pool where the water is coming out of instead of just placing down a water bucket and leaving it like that. But yeah, the next step is to just add in all of the small details. With the exception of trees, we're going to do a separate section on that afterwards. But for me personally, it's possibly going to be some small ponds, a couple of tinier waterfalls, and maybe I'll do some like rock protrusions or something like that, maybe coming out of the side here, just to make the terrain look that much more interesting. But obviously something of that scale doesn't take much time, so you can do it towards the end of the project. So take all of the tips I've already been through with you all and go ahead and do all of the smaller elements that you want to add in. Okay, we have a couple of additions we need to talk about here and here, as well as a few things kind of on the side. We'll get to that in a second, but as you can see, I've just added in a couple of small ponds that actually end up connecting to the river here in the middle. Originally, like I said, I wanted some waterfalls, but I couldn't really work the terrain that well with how they were positioned, and I didn't really want to redo all that much, so instead I've kind of imagined the waterfall is inside of the mountain itself. And kind of created these small ponds with the water almost as though it's a babbling brook of some kind, eventually weaving its way around to connect to the main stream here in the center. Which, by the way, just kind of goes off the cliff here. I'm not going to do all of this terraforming, but in theory, I would kind of do the similar thing just down here. But that's not really in the shot, so I'm going to forget about it. But yeah, I kind of just did all of the same stuff, but on a smaller scale. So adding in the slabs and the stairs, then the texture, and then any other little refinements that I wanted to do afterwards. Which did include these little rock protrusions coming out of the ground. We just got a couple over here and a couple over here just above this archway. So I decided to add these 2 ponds in this specific spot because they just kind of felt very open and empty, as though they needed something. So that's the next thing to do. When you're kind of at that stage, just take a step back once again and look which parts feel like they're missing something. And then you can go ahead and build something there, whether it's a pond or some rocks or a bunch of trees, whatever you want to do. And that nicely leads us on to the next point, which is the addition of trees and all sorts of greenery. The first thing I need to do is get rid of all of these flowers. I have a bunch of alliums, these are. It's just a custom texture, but I don't want all of these on show. If I want to add some more, I'll do that afterwards. But for now, I just want a clean slate. There we go, that's going to be easier to work with. So as far as the trees are concerned, I personally think it's better if you can build some custom ones. The Minecraft trees are great, but they're very square, which I guess is the point. They totally fit in Minecraft, but if you're doing an area like this, they're going to look a little bit out of place. However, if the thought of building custom trees sends shivers down your spine, like it does for me a little bit, it's perfectly fine to just plant and grow some regular Minecraft trees with bone meal. It'll look fine and better than having no trees at all. The large spruce trees that I'm building up in this time-lapse here are not my own design. They are actually from King Z. It's a slightly altered version, but the idea is his. So I'm going to give some credit to him, of course. He has made a fantastic tutorial on how you can build these trees. Really quite simple, surprisingly so. There's a bit of a rhythm to it. You can kind of follow the pattern, and it's really helpful if you don't like building custom trees like me. So I'm going to leave a link to that video down in the description below. But if I possibly forget, which is very likely, I'm going to just say type in on YouTube King Z spruce tree, and it'll most likely be the first video that comes up. Now, of course, you don't have to build these huge custom trees. You can build something a lot simpler. So the small custom trees, like this one over here, this one here, this one here, basically not the really tall ones, those are my design, as you may have guessed. They're a little bit simpler in nature. These ones especially, as you can see, but it's just me trying to get the point across that you don't have to build these giant custom trees that are super complicated and take ages to build. You can just make some altered versions of the vanilla trees. What you could even do is just grab some bone meal and grow some regular spruce trees and just change up the leaf placement a little bit, maybe just get rid of a few to make it seem less symmetrical and replace them down. This is a really poor example because I'm doing it on the fly, but you get the idea. Just do something that isn't a regular Minecraft tree. But like I said, if you don't want to build custom trees, the normal ones are better than nothing. Something else I have done with these trees is at the bottom, I placed in some of the coarse dirt and rooted dirt, just kind of surrounding it at the base. The next step is just to add in any other bits of greenery, so tall grass, some flowers, maybe some bushes, all that sort of thing. In my case, I think I'm just going to be placing down some more long grass. I've already got a couple patches around, but I want a bit more. And I'm also going to place in a few patches of flowers. So with the tall grass, I think it's actually a little bit easier if you go ahead and just gather some of these up with shears. You can make a grass farm pretty easily. Have a look online for some tutorials. But it's a bit cleaner than just spamming a bunch of bone meal and having to clean up afterwards, because bone meal, it spreads quite a lot of grass, as well as flowers, and I don't think I actually want to place the flowers absolutely everywhere. I want to have them in very specific patches. So that is all of the grass placed down. As you can see, I've kind of just done an even spread over all of the grass and dirt blocks that we have here, and it does really help. As for the flowers, we're going to be placing them in these wildflower patches. So usually in real life, you kind of see, especially in a mountainous area, these areas where flowers have been left to grow and they've kind of flourished in that one specific area. So I've kind of grabbed some flowers, all sort of similar. We got some whites, some blues and purples, nothing super duper colorful. But if we just grab maybe, let's say the let's say these three for now, and we kind of just place them in this little nook here and kind of make this as a little bit of a spot where flowers have been able to grow. And it's just a nice pop of color every now and again that you'll be able to see throughout the landscape you're working with. As you can see, that looks pretty nice. So I'm going to add in a few more of these flower patches, not too many because I don't want to drag the attention away from the overall landscape, but I think having a few around is going to look pretty nice. So there we go everybody, those are all of the flowers placed down, and as you can see it's a nice pop of colour and just adds that extra bit of vibrancy to the overall landscape here, which I'm now happy to say is complete. So there we go everybody, I really hope this video has helped out some of you. I'm not a landscaping or terraforming expert, I do not do it that often in this game, but I still wanted to share my 2 cents on what I think is a really important part of building in this game. It can hugely transform your world, so I kind of wanted to share how you could possibly do that without having to spend tons and tons of man hours doing so. So hopefully if you're a bit more of a casual Minecraft player, this video might have been kind of helpful. Let me know if it was in the comments, but I hope you enjoyed nonetheless. Really happy with our finished results here, and I hope you guys are too, but I'll see you next time. Bye for now.